Good evening and welcome to tonight's OKS King's Talk focusing on mental health. My name is Greg Hunter and I am the Deputy Co-Curricular here at King's. Tonight we welcome OKS Imogen Hirsch, whose title presentation is Bringing Heads Together to Change the Conversation on Mental Health. Imogen's an old Marlowe girl, took her A-levels in English, Religious Studies and Spanish before completing a degree in English Literature at Southampton University. She joined the civil service on leaving university before joining the charity sector in 2010, initially at Cancer Research UK. And she is currently a program development lead in mental health and early years at the Royal Foundation of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. Interviewing Imogen tonight will be our head of boarding practice and one of our leads in pastoral care, Matt Thornby. And now it's a warm welcome to both Imogen and Matt. Over to you, Matt. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Mr. Hunter. Firstly, can I thank the OKS for organising and Imogen for agreeing to do this talk. I'm sure you'll agree that the timing is perfect on the back of Children's Mental Health Week, but perhaps in a more general sense, surely there's never been a greater need for schools, as employers, educators and guardians, to be dealing proactively with mental health rather than reacting to mental illness. So on behalf of the school, I'd like to welcome Imogen Hirsch back to King's, albeit virtually, and we all look forward to hearing about her work on mental health and the Royal Foundation. During the talk, if you've got any questions for Imogen, please feel free to type them in the Q&A section, or if you'd like to ask Imogen your question personally, please leave your virtual hand up and we'll try and get through as many as possible. So welcome, Imogen. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks very much for having me.
No worries at all. Could we perhaps start with, perhaps if you wouldn't mind sharing some memories of life at King's?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think my overriding memories of King's, apart from some of the wonderful people I met, was probably the variety of opportunity to try different things and explore what suits you. There's so many things on offer, whether that's sport, music or art or debating. I personally did a huge amount of music, from sort of choirs and orchestras to quartets at various times, but I also did sort of photography, horse riding, and of course lots of sports. I think it's something you perhaps only really appreciate over time when you have less capacity to actually do these kind of things, but you also better understand, I think, how unique and privileged that experience is, and I think being exposed to such a range of opportunities is as much about a chance to find out what you like and what you're good at, but just sort of building an appetite to try new things from an early age. I think it's sort of an expectation of King's that you'll give things a go, and I mean I definitely think it set me up with a good work ethic. There's so many extracurricular activities as well as academic expectations. I think I probably took it a little easy when I got to university, but it set me up with a really good base for how to sort of structure and push myself in my work. So yeah, I think those are my overriding memories of my time at King's.
Fantastic, an answer for the website, thank you. I mean, can you talk to us a little bit about, I mean, Greg's already mentioned it, but could you talk us through a little bit your life after King's, after leaving school?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, as Greg mentioned, I went to Southampton University and I went into the civil service initially, working at the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency. I don't think I'd found my feet at that stage on what I really wanted to do, but it was a really useful initial work experience because, I mean, at the time anyway, they offered lots of training. So I was able to do things like a certificate in management, and I trained as a ISO lead auditor, which is a quality standard and sounds very boring, but I think it was a really useful thing to sort of kick off a way of thinking about systems and improvement, which has been really helpful to me in my later career. And I had a year out volunteering I lived in New Zealand and did a lot of charity volunteering. And I think then I realised I wanted to look at building a career in the charity sector. So I joined the Cancer Research UK graduate scheme. This is a scheme which I think still runs, but probably in a different form now. But at the time you were offered 4 placements in different areas. So I did the fundraising marketing scheme, and I worked in the corporate partnerships team, major giving teams, but they also did schemes for policy, scientific graduates, different sort of areas of interest. And then I was actually offered a permanent role. So I moved off the programme a little earlier to work on a capital build project, building the Francis Crick Institute, which is a research centre near King's Cross, which some of you might have come across. And then I took on a role managing the charity's London Marathon Charity of the Year partnership in 2015. And it was from there that I was introduced to the Royal Foundation, actually initially to provide some consultancy advice around their own London Marathon partnership. But then that became my first role as head of operations for what was to become the Heads Together campaign. And I've been there for just over 5 years now, working on a number of different programmes and projects, and most recently coming back from maternity leave actually to work on a new programme around the importance of early years for the Duchess of Cambridge.
Fantastic, thank you. Again, very happy for you to start your presentation now. If you would like to talk to us a little bit about kind of your current role, that'd be great. Great,
I will hope the tech gods are with me. Do shout, Greg, if this doesn't work. Matt, sorry.
No, it's good.
So just to provide some context for what I'm going to talk about, the Royal Foundation is the primary philanthropic vehicle for the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, previously also working for Prince Harry. And the foundation allows them to focus on areas of particular passion and to become much more heavily involved than their patronage work usually allows in the background work and decision making around our initiatives and programmes. So originally the foundation focused on 3 areas: young people, conservation and military, but over the last 5 years we've expanded to cover a number of different issues like mental health and the early years, as I mentioned. And we've moved away from this fixed thematic approach to focusing on how we can best use the platform that their Royal Highnesses have to shine a light on issues and their ability to convene people to work together to tackle the greatest social problems in a way that's more flexible and responsive. And the foundation is able to operate as a neutral third party with no commercial or specific agenda to try to find ways, new ways of working and solutions which require collective action. We're not subject experts at the foundation, so our approach always involves working very closely with sector experts, including academics, third sector, private sector, both UK and internationally, including commissioning research where required to understand issues better, identify levers for change and where we can best add value. It's so important to be informed by experts in the field to ensure that whatever we do builds on their knowledge and work to date, and importantly doesn't duplicate existing initiatives. We're not an endowed foundation, so we fundraise primarily from philanthropists, corporates and other foundations, but we look to provide seed funding for new initiatives which are developed as part of this process. And the ultimate ambition is that all programmes that prove successful will exit the foundation, either to become new organisations or to be taken up by others who are well placed within the relevant sector. So the foundation has become more widely known over the last few years, but it's usually the programmes themselves which tend to be better known by the public. You may have come across some of these programmes before. The Earthshot Prize is the most recent and possibly most ambitious programme from the foundation to date, which is centred around a 10-year global environmental prize. And all of our programmes are very different, as each issue that we look at is very different, and how the foundation might best add value and bring about change. But to bring this to life and to focus on a topic which is so important right now, I wanted to talk about our approach to developing the Heads Together campaign, which we launched in 2016 and is still very much a focus of the foundation and their Royal Highnesses' work, especially given the impact of COVID-19 on mental health. And as the quote here illustrates, their Royal Highnesses wanted the foundation to look at mental health as they became increasingly aware that the root of many of our greatest social challenges can be caused by and contribute to mental ill health. Some of you will be much more aware of the prevalence of mental health issues than others, but just to provide some context, it's estimated that every year 1 in 4 of us will experience a mental health problem. This represents a sizable proportion of the population, but it's important to remember that these figures exclude certain groups, so those in prisons or sheltered housing, for example, and that also many people will go undiagnosed and therefore unsupported for mental health problems for a variety of reasons. On the most severe end of the spectrum, I think many people are aware of the worrying statistics around suicide. Every week, 125 people in the UK take their own lives. But it is important to remember that mental health is a spectrum and something which does affect us all. Often when people hear the term mental health, they understand that to mean mental ill health. However, we all have mental health as we all have physical health, and we will move up and down the spectrum as a result of everyday pressures and significant life experiences. We can be mentally well, which is often defined as being able to make the most of your potential, cope with life, play a full part in your family, workplace, community, all the way through to being mentally ill. And many of us will move back and forth along the spectrum at different points in our lives. And the graph here is most often represented as a bell curve, with the majority of people in the coping and struggling area. And obviously some groups will be more at risk, or some individuals will be more at risk of mental ill health due to their genetics, environment, be that economic pressures, domestic violence, family breakdown, etc. But also the experiences that we have in our earliest years, which can be a major contributor to how we cope with future stresses and the likelihood of mental health issues in later life. And whilst we do need to avoid medicalising normal emotions, it's also key to understand that normal reactions to life events such as stress, grief, feeling anxious, can get progressively worse if a person is not supported and supported early, potentially leading to an individual becoming mentally unwell. And the case for early support can be seen most keenly in statistics for children, on poor mental health in children. So although rates differ across the UK, research suggests that 1 in 10 primary school children aged 5 to 10 has an identifiable mental health condition. So that's around 3 in every class. More than half of all mental health problems are established by the age of 14. However, the factors that put a child most at risk of developing a mental health problem can often be identified much, much earlier. And therefore, the ability of those around them, from parents and teachers to other professionals, to identify potential risks and issues and support early is crucial, but is often missing, as I'll go into talk about in a moment. There's so much more to say on this issue, and as you can see, it's very complex and interlinked with lots of other social problems, and also exacerbated by issues of access to sufficient quality support. Back in 2015 for the Foundation, our initial challenge was how might we make an impact on this issue, bearing in mind this complexity, funding issues, our position as an apolitical organisation who can't lobby for change directly, and also the many people doing incredible work already in this space from which we need to build. So alongside extensive consultation with experts from across the sector, we commissioned a piece of research with the Centre for Mental Health, which resulted in a report called Missed Opportunities. One of the key points highlighted in the report was the issue of the delay between the onset of potential mental health issues and diagnosis and support. It typically takes 10 years for many young people to get help for mental health difficulties. And obviously during that time, some of those problems can become entrenched, and for many young people escalate until they reach crisis point. And some other key findings were the role that stigma plays in preventing parents, children, and young people from accessing help. Stigma can delay or prevent help seeking as it makes people feel embarrassed or ashamed, leading them to hide their deteriorating mental health. And it can also undermine the well-being of families, carers and friends, making them less likely to seek help for their loved ones off the back of what they've witnessed. Another key finding was around mental health literacy, so language and understanding about mental health. In one study, only 15% of young people had adequate mental health literacy, so being able to correctly identify issues like depression, having the language to talk about those kind of feelings, and recognising when they might need help. And this is particularly concerning for young people. However, this issue of understanding of mental health and well-being, how to talk about it, is clearly a cross-generational issue. So as a result of our consultation in this report, we could see there was a role for the Foundation and their Royal Highnesses to play in tackling stigma in a way that could help to address this issue of mental health literacy, provide a sense of positivity about mental health, that it's okay to talk about and that getting better is possible, but also to help people understand where they could go to for help. And taking feedback from the sector, we wanted to try and reach those on, as part of this, wanted to reach those on the left-hand side of that spectrum we saw earlier, healthy, coping and struggling, because these are often those who relate least to the concept of mental well-being as something that we all need to think about, and also as a way to promote early intervention. Many people just do not see mental health as something that relates to them, seeing it only under that lens of mental illness, and so they're not as likely to take time to actively support their mental well-being, which is particularly important in times of stress and crisis like we're all experiencing now. And we could see that a campaign that connected and resonated with young people was key, but it also needed to be broad enough to reach older people who provide support for them and, of course, maybe experiencing their own mental health issues. So what we needed to do in a nutshell was to try to normalise talking about mental health, show people how to, and encourage them to talk more. And the opportunity was there to use three of possibly the most recognised people in the country to take a lead in opening up this conversation, which was still feeling like a taboo subject in 2015 and arguably still now for some people. And the strapline of our campaign was called, strapline of the new campaign, which became Heads Together, was changing the conversation about mental health. And key to this was raising awareness of the basic fact that we all have mental health, we all need to take care of it and seek support when it's suffering. So we developed partnerships to support the design and delivery of the campaign. We developed a charity partnership group who represented a huge range of people and issues, from Best Beginnings, who support perinatal mental health and young babies, through to Calm, who focus on suicide prevention, at the time specifically for men, but this has since broadened out. And our charity partners were essential to ensure that we could harness their expertise, signpost people to help, but also invite those that they work with and support to talk about their experiences in order to bring this issue to life and make it feel relatable. Whilst we used high-profile people in the campaign, obviously their Royal Highnesses and others who got on board, it was really important that we could share the stories of real people and make sure that they were front and centre. And to add into the mix, as I mentioned before, the foundation had been offered the opportunity to be the London Marathon Charity of the Year for 2017. And the foundation never done public fundraising in this kind of way and wasn't really set up for it. But we were able to work with our charity partners so that they all benefited from marathon places and the income that came with that, but under the umbrella of Heads Together. And the opportunity of the marathon also gave us a sort of climax point to the campaign and a really visual public moment to celebrate mental health. So we launched in April 2016, as I said, and built the campaign through a series of events and other activities to the marathon the following year. And these events focused on a range of different issues, from suicide prevention to issues affecting young people, such as exam stress, support available for parents. We also did a film series called OK to Say, which were designed to show real people, known and unknown faces, including their Royal Highnesses, talking about mental health and their own experiences of opening up, and how that helped them. And this was intended to role model these key messages and help provide people with the kind of language that they often struggle with when wanting to talk about mental health. And it was also important for us to show people talking about diagnosable mental health issues like eating disorders, through to how the impact of traumatic events such as the loss of a loved one might affect their mental well-being. And we also did a lot of work behind the scenes to work with health journalists, other media, and a range of ambassadors to encourage a sort of positive portrayal of mental health in mass media. Media portrayals and reporting of mental illness are incredibly powerful in educating and influencing the public. When it's done well, it can be a tremendous tool in raising awareness and changing attitudes, but sensationalist journalism can overplay the risk of violence and promote fear and mistrust and focus on mental ill health in an unhelpful way. And the mental health charity Mind do research every 2 years to look at newspaper coverage of mental health topics. And their last piece showed that for the first time, stories were more positive than stigmatising, which is wonderful progress. So we did a range of different activities over the course of the year, as I mentioned, Some of those which generated the most media, which some of you might have seen, were a podcast which Prince Harry did with the journalist Bryony Gordon. She started a podcast series called Mad Worlds, which he helped to launch with its initial podcast. We did a documentary with the BBC called Mind Over Marathon, which followed a group of people with mental health issues training for the marathon right till marathon day. We did a call between Lady Gaga and Prince William, which was one of our most watched pieces of content, and definitely one of the most surreal moments of the campaign for me. And I am going to try to show a film. I hope this works. There are so many that I could share, but I wanted to try to bring to life in one pair of people the most amazing, inspiring people I met while working on the campaign. You may have heard the story of Johnny and Neil. Johnny Benjamin is a well-known mental health campaigner who was saved by a stranger on Waterloo Bridge when he was attempting to take his life. And after he recovered, he tried to find the man who saved him and started a campaign called Finding Mike, as that's what he thought Neil's name was at the time. And they were reunited and continued campaigning, and including running the London Marathon for us. And we did this film, which I'm hopefully going to show you. I don't think that's going to work, apologies. Anyway, I would strongly recommend you look up the film of Johnny Benjamin and Neil Laybourne. So I also wanted to share this photo, which represents one of my favourite moments of the campaign, and there were many. We were able to get 40,000 headbands made for every runner in the marathon, which was sponsored by Virgin Money and distributed by the London Marathon in their runner packs. And we'd used headbands throughout the campaign at different moments, and they sort of took on a life of their own as a symbol of the campaign. And in race week, they were everywhere, from the top of Battersea Power Station to the heads of St Paul choir boys to statues at Madame Tussauds. And while we were aware that people run for many amazing causes in the marathon, we wanted to encourage everyone to wear them to represent just that fact that everyone has mental health. And we had no idea how many people would, and there's obviously no way of telling for sure, but I saw thousands of people wearing them during the course of the day, which was really, really incredible. And I got to watch the start of the race pretty much from this angle next to their Royal Highnesses as they pushed the start button, and seeing all of our runners plus hundreds of others wearing their headbands streaming over the start line was definitely one of the most inspiring moments of my career, I think. So we're really proud of what we've achieved through the campaign, but there is still so much more to do. So the foundation, as well as continuing our campaigning work, have invested in a range of different programmes to try to provide support wherever possible to those who need it. So the foundation has worked in partnership to start something called Shout Crisis Text Line, which is a 24-hour anonymous text service, which we started with our largest ever grant of £2 million. And they're currently nearing a major milestone of 1 million text conversations, which is amazing. And we also recently ran an offshoot campaign called Heads Up with the FA, which was aimed at targeting the football community, both players and supporters. And clearly the current crisis is putting huge additional pressure on the nation's mental health. And there is a lot of concern, not only on the short-term impact, especially for those working on the front line, of course, but also the potential longer-term impacts we might see as a result of the long periods of isolation, increased stress, economic pressures that people are living with, and not to mention the impact of experiencing grief in these challenging times. And it's really important for us all to recognise the importance of looking after our mental well-being and being aware of the signs that our friends and families might be struggling. Even during periods of lockdown, there is help available, and we have further information on the Heads Together site if anyone needs it. COVID has and will continue to have a significant impact on everyone's mental health, and it's so important now more than ever, and will continue to be a priority for the foundation in the future. I was going to show one final film, but I don't think I will attempt that. So, oh, maybe I will. Just one final film, which I think encapsulates everything that happened in the campaign much better than I think I can. Thanks, Matt. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
No worries. Thank you very much, Imogen. Please could I encourage a few more questions in while I pad a little bit. I've got a couple of questions myself, but if anybody else wants to throw their virtual hand up to talk directly to Imogen, I've only got to screen her dad apparently. So everybody else, the mic is definitely yours. There's a few questions in there which we'll go through, but I really would, in terms of signposting, really do have a little look through the websites, and there's some wonderful resources on there. And I think obviously some relevant for us as schools, excuse me, but also as employers as well. I mean, your mental health at work website, I think is excellent in terms of all sorts of different resources. When obviously working for a charity that champions that, could you describe, I suppose, what it's like to work at an institution that really does endorse mentally healthy work days? What would you say that an employer needs to provide to be a mentally healthy employer?
That's a really good question. I think that there are so many different sort of tools and resources that people can employ, be that days that sort of promote it, or encouraging, one-to-ones with managers to talk about issues, or the ways that you might escalate support, or bringing employee assistance programs in place. But I think for me, the most important thing that I've seen in discussions with organisations where this is working is around sort of top-down leadership and role modelling. I think that if you as an employee really can genuinely be made to feel that it is okay to speak out, that won't affect how you're viewed at work, your promotional potential, that kind of thing. That's so important, but it only really comes if you see those more senior to you doing it. I think one of the best examples of this was Virgin Money was one of the sponsors for Heads Together, and the CEO at the time, Jane Angadia, spoke very openly about her issues around postnatal depression on returning to work, and you could see the impact that had, because if your CEO is saying it and saying that's okay, then it really permeates down into the culture of the organisation. So I think, yes, there's lots of different things you can put in place to make sure people feel supported, and support sort of time off and transition back into work and all of that kind of thing. But it really does need a sort of cultural shift to make it as impactful as it can be.
Fantastic. Right, should we go through a few of these questions? From Venetia Cheetham, if you've heard of any of these people. No, that's fine. Okay. So Venetia, thank you for your question. So basically, what's the most fun?
I have.
Oh, you have. That's good. What is the most fun you've had whilst working in the charity sector? You can drop some names.
Oh
here.
Gosh, that's a good question. Yeah, I think there's sort of fun, and then something that's really sort of inspiring, which is sometimes the same and sometimes not. I think the people that I get to meet on a regular basis who have been impacted by the issues that we're talking about, it is really the main driver and motivator for me. And actually, interestingly, during lockdown, we've been able to be quite flexible with our approach to engagements, as we call them, so anything that the Royal Highnesses do. So we've had lots of calls with, you know, real people, families, frontline workers, hearing about their situations, and I maybe wouldn't class that as fun, but it's such an important part of the job for me to be able to hear directly from those people. In terms of fun, I mean, there have just been some very, very bizarre moments since I joined the foundation. I think the most fun would probably be on marathon day. I was sort of in my operational role, sort of heading up the different things happening on the day, and therefore was travelling with Prince William, Kate Middleton and Prince Harry around the route. So that was fun to kind of get to see their interaction, but I also got to go in the blackout convoy car, which was pretty fun. Driving down the wrong way on the roads in central London. It's pretty fun.
Thank you. Question from our president of the Common Room, Andrew McFall. I don't know whether you kind of overlap with Andrew McFall, maths teacher, might have been in your time. Says, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us tonight. We're currently enduring a global pandemic and lockdown, both of which are pretty horrendous. However, I think there will be some changes to our lives which will actually be seen as a positive. How much do you think it has removed the taboo on discourse on mental health issues, and do you think this will endure if lockdown is ever lifted?
Yeah, that is a good question. I would hope that it does endure. I think that sometimes you just need to, it's about pushing the boundaries of what people feel comfortable talking about. Whilst we would never take sole credit for this, so many people are working really, really hard in the sector, but I think for us it was heartening that mental health has been actually quite at the forefront of discussions around the pandemic. I think people were quite quick to start talking about the mental health impact and the support that people need. So I think that's definitely good. I think also, I mean, realistically, the work-life balance that, I mean, not now while schools are closed, it's obviously so challenging, but I think for many people working in sort of offices and, you know, the sort of work from home balance and realistically what will continue possibly indefinitely. I mean, we as an organisation are looking at not having a sort of a main office base in the future and working much more flexibly. A lot of these things have been shown that they can work, and they do provide people in better times with a better work-life balance. So I do think it will endure. However, there is, you know, clearly going to be a lot of need and a lot of support required for people into the future. And I think that you sort of don't want to be sensationalist about it. Some people have described it as sort of a tsunami of need coming. I don't think we know what will happen, but there definitely will be a long tail to this once the initial sort of health crisis is over. So I think it will be really important to make sure that it's not only that it's talked about, but that investment and priority is put around that from all sides where that needs to be to help people as we sort of go into the recovery mode.
That's great. Questions are flying in now. Right. Perhaps a signposting question then. So any insights on how concerned family, parents, siblings can support?
Yes, I mean, I think that there's so many organisations out there providing support. We worked most closely with an organisation called The Mix and also Young Minds. The Mix is more sort of direct support for young people. So I think it's really helpful to be able to know where you can signpost young people themselves to tools that they might want, and they offer it in a really flexible format, so peer support, moderated forums, things like that. But Young Minds provide support for parents, because I think that, you know, if you are worried about your children, it's really important that you get support and understand how you can have those conversations. And a lot of these charities will, you know, they have sort of helplines, but they also will offer counselling services and more one-to-one ongoing support where that's required. So it's really worth looking out for that. You know, the reality is it is quite difficult sometimes to quickly move through NHS support in the right way. And also it might be that all that's needed is an initial discussion, understanding whether signs that you're seeing are something to worry about. And so I would really encourage people to reach out and have that initial conversation, even if it's just about allaying your initial fears, or to sort of get the help that's actually needed. That's
great. No, thank you. Greg, shall we go to a live question? Sorry, if you can sort that out for me. Right. Jonathan, all yours.
Hopefully I've unmuted myself, Matt.
There you go, you're fine.
Good. Firstly, thank you, Imogen. That was absolutely fascinating, and thank you for giving your time to us this evening. Perhaps if I can, whilst recognising your apolitical position, how can I frame this fairly? Can you give me perhaps your own sense of the scale of further investment that you might feel still necessary to train and support staff in early years settings, who are themselves quite often young and inexperienced, and have this huge task in front of them, and may not always necessarily recommend it? Seems to me an enormous issue.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's a really good question, and I think a lot of our more recent work, which is obviously really closely related to mental health, but as I said, focused on early years, has been thinking about how the right workforce are trained appropriately to identify these issues as soon as possible. I do think it is a big issue. I think funding for early years professionals working in nurseries and other settings makes it very challenging to be able to offer the right training and the quality of care that's needed. So I guess, it's difficult for me to answer sort of commenting on sort of government policy around that, but we very much recognise that there is a lot more to do, and I think that what we're thinking about with regards to early years specifically is how we can help raise priority around and understanding around the importance of the earliest years up the agenda in a similar way as we have tried to do around mental health, because we can't actively, as I mentioned, lobby, and we can't suggest policy change. But I think when things become more important to everyone and are talked about more, these things sort of can become vote winners and push up prioritisation in that way. But so I'm not sure that's totally answered your question. But yes, I definitely agree that more training for early years professionals in both understanding basic brain development and where they can support and identify issues as early as possible is really important.
Thank you very much. And I have a sort of self-interest in that. My wife for many years did early years nursery work, and as a more mature lady was often really the mummy to a lot of the teachers, who were wonderful, but very poorly paid and very limited training, and certainly not a training in this area. And it seems obvious to both of us that more investment in that area would reap dividends in later years. And I think mental health issues are just another thing that they need to be empowered with to help them further with that, which seems that they're in large part not getting what they need at the moment. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. Promising to screen out your dad, but this must be a different Nicholas Lewis. There's a question here. Has social media made your task much more difficult? And to what extent is the Royal Foundation able to influence social media providers?
Good question. I mean, I don't think it's as simple as social media is good or bad in its own right. There's so many issues that social media do create, especially for young people, and I think in many ways is a clear contributor to some of the problems that we're seeing. We at the foundation did quite a bit of work around actually focused on cyberbullying, but bringing together some of the sort of big social media companies to try to tackle this issue. I mean, I would say that there was mixed success with that, to be quite honest. I think that we got some of the way there, but it's clearly going down a more legislative route. Sorry, I can't say that word. And they haven't really sort of taken up the baton to sort of do that themselves, unfortunately. What we have done is worked quite closely with a number of different organisations, including the BBC, who've been looking at developing the sort of educational piece and tools and apps for both young people and parents, because I think one of the real difficulties is for parents and teachers and basically anyone who's not, you know, a teenager or a child, is the technology is moving so fast, and actually understanding, you know, what's out there, what's going on these platforms is really difficult. So they're trying, these kind of organisations are trying to work to really support the education of parents and those around young people, but also developing tools that help young people understand how to behave online, you know, legally, but also thinking about what they're putting out there, what they're consuming, screen time. I mean, it's a really, really difficult issue, because the technology is increasing so quickly. It's very difficult to catch up, both in terms of legislation, but also support.
Fantastic. Question from an ex-house mistress of Walpole and a former colleague of mine in the biology department. So from Jean Watson, so what programs do you support for the mental well-being of 4 to 6 year olds? Very much in your wheelhouse. Jean says that she runs mental health programs for this age group and linking young children and elderly people together in nursing homes. And would this fit in with the kind of Heads Together context?
So our work on this age group is mainly focused on a platform that we helped to fund and develop with 3 charities, which is called Mentally Healthy Schools. And that the idea behind that platform was really meeting a need that we had understood from the teaching profession, that it's really hard to know what programs and resources are good, are the right quality. And also there's thousands out there, like where do you even start? So that platform is run by the Anna Freud Centre, which some of you might know, but developed in collaboration with 2 other charities, Place to Be and Young Minds. And the idea is that they have a team who quality assure and curate resources, but also produce their own content to really help explain different issues for teachers in a way that you know makes sense in the setting that they're working in. So we signpost through that, although it's now run by Anna Freud Centre solely, that we signpost out to different resources. So anyone who has resources or programs that they feel should be signposted from that can contact Anna Freud Centre through the Mental Healthy Schools website. It's very difficult for us to get behind specific resources out, but our best role is about how can we sort of shine a light on issues and bring people together to tackle a problem. And so something like Mental Healthy Schools is an example of that.
Yeah, great stuff. Greg, so we go to another live question. So to Tina, please. Tina, if you unmute yourself, the mic is yours.
I am. Sorry about that. Hello, Imogen. Thank you for bringing talk to us this evening. It's an area that I'm very interested in, and it's my work too. But I just wondered, with the charity, are you looking at practices like mindfulness, you know, body, breath and mind, looking at the approach that it's not just about the mind, it's, you know, how we feel, what we internalize, how we can actually practice things like mindfulness that maybe give us a moment to learn how to sort of pause and breathe and, you know, get in touch with actually what we're feeling so that we can verbalize that. So I'm just wondering, with your charity, is that something that you're looking at taking into schools and getting it out to young people before maybe some of the issues become too developed, you know, that they start to sort of learn techniques, how to listen to themselves, to understand what they're feeling?
So the way that the foundation work, we don't work as sort of primary service providers in that sense. So we wouldn't sort of look to deliver programs ourselves, but we work closely with the partners who, for example, work on mentally healthy schools to think about the kind of content that they're looking at and to cover issues like that. I think this also comes back to that the point I was talking about before around language and mental health literacy, and actually how early you can help to build that understanding with young people. And that's really why, so Mental Healthy Schools is currently just for primary schools, but it is due to launch hot off the press, a secondary school side to that site in March. But the reason we decided to start with primary schools in the first instance was because of that need to get there as early as possible. And actually now why our early years work is sort of going back even further, because, you know, as you're saying, the sooner you can help children to understand what's going on in their brain and manage their own emotions, the better. And the better they'll be equipped and set up for later life. So that's a roundabout way of saying, you know, all of what you've described is really important. We don't sort of deliver those programs ourselves, but we very much want them to be part of the platforms where people can go and access that kind of quality support.
Thank you.
Great stuff. A question from Izzy Brown, which I think you've kind of almost just answered there. So do you think that enough support is available for people of all ages, not just the younger audience? I think in terms of you expanding your platform to secondary education, I presume this is kind of a bit of a mission statement to encapsulate perhaps a kind of a wider age range.
Yeah, and you know, mental health issues affect everyone of all ages. So it's really important that, you know, for us thinking about our different programs and our campaigns to make sure that all, you know, we are reaching and supporting as many different people as possible. So yes, the secondary school work is rolling out. We have a specific piece of work looking at support for emergency responders. We developed a platform called Frontline last year in response to this issue, and working with charities who specifically support the emergency responder community. So yeah, it's really important for us to think of not just all ages, but the kinds of specific problems that are most pressing for people at different times. And something we've started to think about a little bit more is older people. So actually sort of suicide risks are rising really quite significantly for much older age groups, in particular men. And you know, I don't know exactly where that will go, but we're always conscious and looking at where new sort of significant issues are emerging.
That's great. What would you say are kind of the best way to combat negative stigma surrounding mental health? In the instance of family members, so an example given here is kind of the parent being judgmental and reaching out for help in a negative light. It's painting the picture that reaching out is a negative thing.
It's really difficult. I mean, I think there's obviously things that can be done surrounding that particular family, but part of this sort of comes back to the premise, well, for me anyway, comes back to the premise of Heads Together. It needs to be at a sort of cultural and society level to sort of permeate down. I think, you know, quite often when people feel, I think from that question they're talking about potentially the parents being judgmental, you know, I think yeah, you know, when that will happen as a result of what you know, that parent thinks other people will think of that situation. So although it's not a quick fix at all, you know, part of it is around that sort of cultural shift, but also having people talking about mental health that those people respect, resonate with, understand to be the kind of people that, you know, they listen to. Because if you hear someone that you respect talking about mental health in a really open way, it does make a difference. It takes a lot of time, but it does make a difference. It's really difficult. One of the most challenging things with young people is if, you know, their parents are not open to having that conversation. I mean, I would encourage anyone who knows a young person in that situation, just to encourage them to seek anonymous help through some of the platforms that I've just sort of talked about before, like the Mix or Shout. It won't solve that problem, but for them to be able to connect with other young people who are going through the same thing could be really helpful. Yeah,
that's great. Perhaps a career question here. So can you work in mental health or become involved in it without having a specific degree or qualification that's directly related to it? I mean, perhaps obviously you can use some of your volunteers as examples of kind of people that are making a difference in this area.
Yeah, I mean, it obviously just depends on the kind of role you want to have. Clearly, if you're sort of front-facing, clinician or providing direct support, there will need to be training involved in that at whatever level. But there are a number of charities who have volunteers who work on helplines or other sort of services where it's not sort of a degree or a qualification as such. There'll be a training process. I actually trained as a Shout crisis volunteer myself. It was around 30 hours of online training, and I'm able now to sort of go onto that platform and take those conversations, and I'm supervised by a clinician, so I'm not left to my own devices, and they can come in and help, or I can escalate conversations to them as needed. So yeah, there's different ways that you could get involved in a more sort of informal way, through to obviously much more in-depth training to deliver counselling or other support services that need that kind of qualification. And also, obviously, I don't have a qualification in mental health, and I don't work in mental health as such, but there's other ways to sort of be involved in the subject.
Do you think without social media, mental health would improve throughout the general population? I don't want to sound too much like a parent there, sorry.
I don't think getting rid of social media is a silver bullet by any means. And actually we have to recognise actually the power that social media can have in helping people to connect, and a lot of sort of peer support services for young people in particular are done through social media. Saying that, as I said before, I do think it does have a massively detrimental effect on mental health as well. But it sort of comes back to the point around how can we better equip young people to sort of understand the impact that social media has, the way it can kind of play with your mind and encourage you to use it more, and how you can take proactive steps to use it in a safe way, both to keep you sort of physically safe, as it were, but mentally safe as well. So it's not going to go anywhere. I don't necessarily think taking away entirely would be the answer either, but I do think there's a lot that needs to be done, both from the social media companies to play their part in it, but also education support for young people and how to use it safely.
That's great. I'm going to try and merge two questions together to avoid Greg winding me up. So what do you think is the right age to start teaching children about mental health? And have you done much work specifically looking at mental health problems within the LGBT community?
So to the first question, I think it should be something that we talk to children about from as early as possible. And I think that some people can feel nervous about that, in that, I don't know, somehow talking about mental ill health can create problems, or that we're saying that children can display signs of mental health issues, and that's just a fact. But I think, sort of alluding to the point one of I think it was Tina made earlier, the sooner you can help children just understand, this is how my brain works, this is how it will be impacted by things like stress, this is how I can help to manage those emotions and talk about those emotions. That's not teaching them about mental health as such, but it is. It's teaching them, how to manage themselves and manage their emotions, which I think is really, really important. And then you can, of course, later on come to a greater awareness of specific issues, specific diagnosable problems that they need to be aware of. But I think it's more about instilling in them that it's a normal thing to talk about and giving them that language. In terms of the LGBT community, we were really focused about the Heads Together campaign and trying to represent people from all different communities. So some of the ambassadors we got on board were sort of from that community, but it's very hard with a sort of very broad campaign to do that well. So actually our charity partner, the Heads Together charity partners, are at the moment looking at some more targeted work to connect with different communities, including hopefully the LGBT community better. I mean, there are, they are at a significantly higher risk of mental health issues, and so it's really important, but that will hopefully come in the next year or so.
Imogen, that's absolutely fantastic. I've got 24 questions which I've not got all the way through. I'm very happy to pass the ones that we haven't dealt with to the OKS office, and I think if we can pass them to you, and maybe we can put them,
yes, of
the
course,
answers into, together with the person that answered it, that would be absolutely great. Greg has asked whether you could actually go back and try and find that video that he said it was up in the top left-hand corner of the screen. I think he wanted to finish with that, if that's possible.
Yes, of course, I will try my best.
But while you do that, I mean, just on behalf of everyone at the OKS and the school, I mean, can I just thank you very much for everything you brought to us this evening? It's been really, really useful.
No problem. I hope this works.
We ran past Waterloo Bridge, which was the bridge where we met all those years ago, and that was really just kind of overwhelming, and just like, oh my gosh, we went from that moment on the bridge where we, you know, Neil taught me how to take my own life to running the marathon together. Yeah, I just can't put it into words really what that's like. It's really... Sorry.
I think it was me who pointed out it was there. I shouldn't have done that.
No, it's fine. It's just extraordinary, really. It's very emotional because it's just a very special relationship that we have, and just the whole atmosphere of the crowd and what it all means, and you know, having the support of the young royals. It's just it's really hard to put it into words, but it does feel like something. A real tipping point. It feels like the start of something really, really huge, and it's really exciting. It's really exciting.
Thank you so much, Imogen, for that. It was fantastic. Thank you, Matt, for hosting tonight with such a natural relax and ease, and facilitating such an enjoyable evening and a wonderful talk. I really appreciate your time, Matt. And Imogen, as we always hear, often, you know, we cannot talk enough about the importance of mental health, and hearing what you've said and some of the moments you shared with us, hearing Retirement Kings and that fantastic efforts with that Heads Together campaign, as you just saw just then, was really just amazing, sort of amazing impact that was made. And yeah, and the final thing I sort of take from it is that idea, that thought that actually it's really important to take a preventative approach, and actually those people that are not experiencing mental health problems, actually making sure they're aware of them so that they can prevent, hopefully down the road, what might happen, and really sort of promoting that idea is really important. So thank you so much for your time, Imogen. It is really appreciated. Finally, that is our last talk this half term. We have a lot of wonderful talks ready to go next half term. Just like to say that if there is anybody listening or watching that, and particularly in the OKS, that would like to give a talk, they can contact Molly in the OKS office. If you'd like to get in contact with Imogen, you've heard something tonight, you'd like to support any of what she's doing, or you would like just to find out some more, please don't hesitate to contact Molly also in the OKS office, and she can put you through to Imogen. Once again, thank you so much, Matt. Thank you, Imogen. It was a wonderful night. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I hope you enjoy the rest of your night, and I hope to see you in a couple of weeks' time for the next King's Talk. And have a good night. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.